Philadelphia 76ers are a really solid team. They are kind of that third team that everyone kind of thinks about. They are currently in third, but a lot of people look at like the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics as the most likely to come out of the East. Although the 76ers, I really don't think would surprise anybody. James Harden is actually having a very good year. Still have Joel Embiid. Tyrese Maxey is really kind of coming into his own and has really been just solid all year for this team. And look, Philly's coming off of a huge win against the Milwaukee Bucks, ending Milwaukee's 15-game winning streak, which has been huge. So they got their sort of like big three, and just a solid team all around. Tucker really adds some toughness. Tobias Harris, he has his moments. He can have rough games, but he can also have some really good, solid games. Regardless, is just a solid vet. The bench could be better, but that's one of the big concerns that people look at with Philly is like, hey, the bench is kind of lacking, but they do have some solid pieces off the bench that I think can, help this team really make a run. And at the end of the day, once you get into the playoffs, you're only running 7-8 guy rotations. And so you have your core guys pretty much intact, and you're in a good position to really try to make a run. Philly's going to be a tough out at the worst. You trying to beat Philadelphia, I don't see any team outside of like the Celtics and Bucks really beating them in a 7-game series. And I do think the Sixers, they have the firepower to keep up with those guys. So I do think that they are up there in the contender status. But a lot of questions are sort of centered around James Harden and will he stay with Philadelphia after this year? Or is he going to go to the Houston Rockets? Now, to me personally, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I really don't. Look, Houston has an amazing, young, talented team. No doubt about it, right? This is a team that has a promising future. They're probably going to get a very high draft pick. They could even land Victor Wembanyama. And if that happens, then, watch out. This is a team that could be a real contender for the foreseeable future. And right now, they are number one in the tank race. So their odds of landing Victor is absolutely huge. And James Harden would add just that, star level talent around these young guys. But I don't know. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for James Harden to go from a bona fide contender and having, his two sort of stars, like one guy that is better than he is, and then another guy who is really coming in up on the rise and is already kind of proven, then to go to a team that, it is going to take years, very likely, to get to that contention status, right? Like Houston, I think even if they land Victor Wembanyama, I still believe it's going to be 2, 3, maybe even 4 years before this team really kind of comes into their own. And it's like, oh no, now they're scary, right? Like now it's like, okay, like these guys are really good and they have all the pieces there. And granted, if you get James Harden, right? So let's say you land Victor Wembanyama, right? And you get James Harden. You could use a lot of these young pieces to then go and make some trades to kind of put and expedite that contention status, I guess, because they have a ton of draft picks. They have a ton of young players. Again, it's like, why not stay the course if you're Houston? I just don't think Harden makes a lot of sense for the Houston Rockets, but I also don't think he makes a lot of sense I don't think Houston makes a lot of sense for him. Like, I don't think the relationship either way would really make a ton of sense unless Harden is just really okay with just playing, and look, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe he is, right? Maybe he is fine with just not winning a championship, and maybe he doesn't want the pressure, right? That's a real concern. That's a real question that has been with James Harden for a long time. Like, can he step up in the moment? Can he be the guy? Can he do X, Y, and Z to lead a team to an NBA championship? Now, granted, if he took a young Rockets team to a NBA title, well then, I mean, come on, that would be huge for his legacy, but I just realistically don't see that happening. The West is really good. I don't see it getting any worse, especially when now you have teams like, the Phoenix Suns. They're only going to be better next year because they're going to be able to take the holes that they currently have and kind of fill a lot of those. They have more than enough firepower with Kevin Durant. You have Chris Paul, Ayton, and then as well as a Devin Booker. I mean, Devin Booker and KD already in like 3 games have shown that they are just a handful offensively. So they're going to be able to go and get the pieces they need defensively next season to kind of round out this roster, maybe even use Ayton as a trade chip in order to get those pieces. And then, Dallas, Kyrie and Luka, they've kind of been struggling as of late. They're like 2-5 since they've been together. But again, that was more of a move for like the foreseeable future, right? Got Kyrie, got Luka. Now we could go and get the pieces we need to better fit those two, and then they could step up. You have young teams that are continuing to be great. The Kings, the Timberwolves, the Lakers, a full season with their roster, they're probably going to be better, right? Like there's a lot of questions in this stacked tight Western Conference, and that's not even mentioning like the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, the Warriors, Timberwolves, Pelicans, if Zion can stay healthy. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's like, why go to the West where it's just so stacked when you could stay in the East and you're going to be a top 3 team at the worst, right? And if you ride it out, who knows what happens next year? Like do the Celtics start looking to trade Jaylen Brown? Because there's a lot of questions about him potentially leaving because he's not going to sign an extension because he'll make more money as a free agent if he signs a new contract. So there's that risk of like, is he going to leave? So if he ends up leaving and they don't get a big enough return for like another star level guy to replace him, they could fall off the standings and it could just be down to you and the Bucks, right? Or, how is Middleton and Drew Holiday and them, are they going to age well, like another year or two? I think however you slice it, it makes the most sense for James Harden to stay in Philly. Not just that, but he doesn't have the pressure. If he goes to Houston, yes, very likely the idea is like, okay, they're not a contender, right? So maybe there's not the pressure of having to win a championship in Houston, but he doesn't have the pressure as the guy in Philly. He's second fiddle, right? He's not the guy. That's Joel Embiid's team. Unless he knows, because there have been rumors and little murmurs and stuff about Joel Embiid maybe potentially wanting out. So if that's the case, then maybe that's why James Harden wants to leave. Maybe James Harden's like, hey, I'm going to go back to Houston, because Embiid is going to request a trade if we end up losing this year. That could be something. I mean, he would know better than anybody in the locker room. And again, that's just speculation. That's just talk. But it's not that far-fetched. Joel Embiid might look at it as like, I just can't win with Philly. Let me go somewhere else where I can. And if that's the case, then, okay, now the James Harden wanting to leave and go to the Houston Rockets, I guess that now makes a little more sense, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to win here by myself with just me and Maxey, and then if they end up trading Embiid, they're building an entirely new team. They're probably going to get young players. That is something that could be a possibility. Does Houston even go and try to get Embiid? Right? Do they go and take like basically all their young guys except for like Victor Wembanyama and say, hey, we'll give you everybody. We'll give you Smith. We'll give you, Kevin Porter. We'll give you a ton of draft picks. Whatever you want, take your pick. We will give it to you. Give us Joel Embiid, and then maybe Harden goes to Houston. That could be pretty interesting, right? And now you got Victor Wembanyama, Joel Embiid, and James Harden as to kind of build around as like the core. That maybe that's something that they're looking at. I just that's speculation, but there's just so many report after report after report of James Harden wanting to go to the Houston Rockets, and that there's real belief that James Harden wants to go there. And I don't see it making sense for Harden nor the Houston Rockets. If you're Houston, stay the course. Why would you want to fall into the James Harden trap again when you have such a good young team that you're building and growing with that is very likely only going to get better as time goes on? You're going to continue to get high draft picks. And if there's ever that situation, say like a Brooklyn Nets situation, right? Like now you could go and because you have all these guys under real cheap contracts for the next 7 years. Now you could go get 2 stars or whatever to put around your young core. Maybe that's how they're looking at it. Maybe James Harden is like the first step, right? But even then, it's like James Harden's only getting older. If James Harden was like 30, it's like, okay, well, you get James Harden, you can ride it out a year, and then, maybe go look to go get another star in the next offseason. Or maybe go look to trade for another star. But I mean, he's 33, he's gonna be 34. I don't know. Unless they already have an idea of like, okay, well, we could go get this star, or they're gonna go try to trade for another star. Maybe that's something they look at, right? That could be a real possibility. Just regardless, at the end of the day, it's like I don't really see it. But stranger things have happened. We have seen guys just go. I mean, LeBron James, right? He went back to Cleveland. Granted, they had Kyrie Irving, right? But there were a lot of questions about originally, like, why would LeBron James go back to Cleveland when he's with Miami and he's on a contender with Miami? And then all of a sudden, they go and trade for Kevin Love, and then they start putting the pieces around. And you're like, oh, okay. Like now, Cleveland's better than Miami would have been. And they ended up winning a championship in Cleveland. Now, granted, James Harden isn't LeBron James, but still, maybe that's kind of the same idea. Maybe that's the same process. Maybe Houston's like, hey, if you come back here, we will go and use our young talent outside of like, maybe 2 or 3 guys that they really want to keep. And we'll go get you the pieces that you need to contend and win a championship here. That could be something, but I don't know. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's really interesting. And as always, I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think James Harden? Yeah, like I could see James Harden going to Houston, or do you kind of like agree with me? Like, yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for Houston nor James Harden. Or do you think like, no, he just doesn't really care. He just wants to play basketball. He wants to play in a place that he's happy, I mean, if he does go back to Houston, it is a great example of the grass isn't always greener, right? I mean, he went from Houston to the Brooklyn Nets, and that was a total disaster, and then was able to force his way to Philly, and now he's on Philly, and it's like, now what? And now what? He's going to go back to Houston? It's like, you should have just stayed in Houston, man. Granted, Houston may be in a better position now than they ever were. So that's something else worth noting. But anyway, again, love to hear your thoughts, opinions, however you feel. Let me know down in the comments below.